All right, Tim Stasio, welcome to the Dispatch. Thanks for being on.
I've worked really hard to get where I'm at now and to have the knowledge and experience I've had. You've got to take that initiative and go get it. I had to take the installation manual home with me and get to know it and then bring it back to the job and put it back in the unit the next day. The trades allow us to get back to what makes us proud and things that makes us function.
Hey guys, welcome to the Dispatch, where job site legends get the mic. Join me every other Thursday as I sit down with the biggest names in the trades to find out what's really happening to keep America running. So whether you're on the road or in the garage, beer in hand, settle in for a great conversation. I'm Ryan Prosser, and this is the Dispatch. Welcome back to the Dispatch, where job site legends get the mic. Today we're joined by Tim Stasio, a longtime HVAC pro, business owner, consultant, designer, trainer, and content creator. Welcome to the Dispatch, Tim.
Thank you for having me.
Cool, man. So, you've got a pretty good following online, but for folks that don't know, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I'm in North Carolina native. I live out here by the coast. I've been doing HVAC for around 27 years now. I started in industrial and commercial, and then started my own business, sold that business, and now I've started a new business that allows me to do a lot of volunteer work, primarily, which is my focus. And that's a consulting business. So I work as an HVAC trainer, a designer, a comfort consultant, and I do a lot of online educational and sometimes humorous content creation as well.
Okay, so you covered some ground there that's a bit new for me, and maybe HVAC pros know it, but probably HVAC non-pros don't. What like you talked about comfort consultant, for someone who doesn't know, say more about that.
Well, it's a funny thing about the need for consultants. If we all just did our jobs, we wouldn't need consultants. But unfortunately, some industries are rife with people that pretend to know what they're doing, but they actually don't. And so a lot of houses get built and HVAC systems get installed and they simply don't work. And so what I have made a good living over my years doing is going back and figuring out what happened, what went wrong, why is the house not comfortable, why are there moisture problems, why are there indoor air quality problems. And because I'm not only looking at the HVAC unit, I'm zooming out and looking at it as a system, but even zooming out further and taking into account the home performance and building science aspect of it, I'm able to use science and data and metrics and figure out why the home is having the problems that it's having, and then recommend solutions that solve problems at their root cause.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned designer. I know that's something you take seriously as well. We've seen via some of our guests, and then also, there's some subreddits that I totally love, but I've seen some real design disasters. It must just kill you when you see a poorly designed system, knowing it's so difficult to change that once a new construction is complete, right? I mean, I saw one where the term escapes me. What's the air intake called? That large kind of like
the return grill.
The return grill.
Yeah.
And the return grill was placed directly next to a toilet in a guest bathroom or something. and and I'm like, man, could there be a worse, more gross place for a return to be placed?
Yeah. Sharon's caring.
Yeah. What are some of the design flaw? Like that's an obvious F, right? But like, what are some of the other ones that you've seen? That someone like you that takes design seriously, as you put your head in your hands.
One of the biggest things is that they did not calculate what size equipment needed to go in there, and so there's an industry term in residential called a manual J, and that is a heat load calculation. We calculate how much heating and cooling that the building needs. And then you need to find HVAC equipment that can match those needs. And then the third step of that process is to build a duct system that can accommodate that. And what ends up happening is people use rules of thumb. They say, well, that's 1,500 square feet. We've always put this size air conditioning system in there. That's what's always worked. And that's what we're going to do with this house instead of doing the math. And the thing is that houses have changed over the years. Codes get stricter. Houses get better insulated, better sealed. There are other variables that we have to consider. And so those old rules of thumb that may have worked back 40 years ago when the previous generation trained or worked, and that they're the ones that are training the newer generation, those don't work anymore. And that results in a lot of the comfort and health problems that I see in homes today.
Got it. I, you know, you and I were talking offline about being whiskey guys. I myself am a bit of a bourbon guy. I think you are as well. I don't know if you're primarily a bourbon neat or on the rocks, but I recently learned kind of an interesting fact about ice cubes, and thinking about them as kind of the OG refrigerant to
Yeah.
some extent,
Right.
and that when an ice cube, of course, can get frozen to a temperature far below 32 Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
and that when so therefore not all ice cubes are created equal. You put an ice cube that's at 30 degrees Fahrenheit in your whiskey, it's going to very quickly dilute your whiskey versus
Right.
one that's at 5 Fahrenheit that's going to do nothing but cool the whiskey until it had the coolness pulled out of it and
Yeah.
into the warmer whiskey, and so you're going to get quite a bit of cooling before any dilution takes place.
Right.
So two people could get very different levels of drunkenness depending on the
It's true.
temperature of the ice cube that goes in.
That is true. Now that all that can be avoided if you just had it neat, which
That's
I'm
right.
a bourbon
That's right.
neat. I'm a like pour it in the glass, hand me the glass. That's all I need. I don't need mixed. I don't need anything. I don't need ice. I like it neat. I like to swirl around and see the legs on it. So I'm that guy. But yeah, and what you're referring to is two types of heat reactions: a sensible reaction and a latent reaction. Sensible reaction is the temperature of that ice cube warming up until it gets to 32 degrees. And then the latent heat reaction is it changing state. That's it changing from a solid to a liquid. And the entire time that ice is still 32 degrees, but it is melting, it's changing state. That actually happens in a home where you have air that gets cooled down. Once it gets cooled down to a certain temperature, the moisture starts changing state from a vapor to a liquid. And that's the water that you see dripping out of your AC unit drain. And what ends up happening is when the systems aren't designed correctly, that process doesn't happen. We cool the room, like I'm in a humid climate. I'm in the North Carolina coast. We cool the building, but we never continue to cool it so that we actually pull that moisture in and make it change state. And we don't pull the moisture out of the air. And that's why a lot of houses have the moisture problems that they do. So very similar concept. I like to refamiliarize myself with having a glass of whiskey every now and then. So I consider it training. So I don't forget a refresher, but same concept. Physics is physics, man.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm looking forward to some whiskey research with you at AHR. I understand that
Yeah.
you and I think a lot of our listeners are going to be there. I have a question, something I've always wondered. I've heard the answer a couple times. It never quite checks out. I know this is automotive, so this is going to be a curveball for you. Why the condensation coming out of the tailpipe? I think a tailpipe, I think of something that's, I wouldn't touch it. It's going to be so hot that it would burn you, and yet a liquid dropping out of what's going on there?
So, what people don't realize is that when we burn a fuel, and really when you're talking about that fuel being gasoline, propane, or natural gas, there is two main atoms or molecules in that fuel. There's carbon and there's hydrogen. When we burn a fuel, we're creating a chemical reaction. And one of the byproducts is heat. That's what we want, is heat when we burn a fuel. But another byproduct is water vapor. And so for natural gas, I think it's like for every pound of natural gas that we burn, we make a pound of water. And that water has to go somewhere. So I don't know what the ratio is for gasoline, but there is water vapor that is a byproduct that comes out of the tailpipe. When the tailpipe is cold on a cold morning, that water vapor does exactly what we just talked about. It changes state. It goes from a gas to a liquid, and that liquid is what we see dripping out. Once the tailpipe has warmed up, that water vapor stays warm enough where we no longer see that as a liquid, but there is still water vapor in those fumes.
Interesting. So that's why we're seeing this predominantly from parked cars.
Yeah.
because the tailpipe is less hot. And this doesn't have anything to do with the air conditioning. This is the water vapor from the combustion of the internal
Yes.
combustion engine. Okay, I got it. All right. Tim Stasio, welcome to the dispatch. Thanks for being on. This episode is brought to you by FieldMind, built for the hands that keep America running. FieldMind gives your field service techs ready access to technical documentation, service history, and your team's best tribal knowledge right where they are, in the field. FieldMind is the tool for field service techs. Learn more at fieldmind.com. So I think we've got a couple of questions from the audience here.
Okay.
I'm going to introduce my producer, Susie. Susie, I think we got a couple questions from the audience. What do we need to know?
That's right. So, we have some questions from the HVAC community online. Let's try to help these folks out. Let's start with the first one. Hey everyone, I'm James and I'm brand new to the trades and honestly struggling. The older guys on my crew don't really teach. They either brush me off or act annoyed when I ask basic questions. It makes learning on the job way harder than it should be. For those who've been through this, how did you deal with older techs who gatekeep or won't share knowledge? What actually worked?
So, Tim, I think this might be better for you. I'll say that my dad, I was so close with my dad, and yet when it came time to like teach, it always went the same way. So I'm thinking, he's 50, I'm 10, or whatever the age difference was. And it started out with like, I want to teach my son, hey, here's how this thing works. Like, we're in the garage working with wood and tools and making, whatever. I think one time we made a speaker box for some subs I was going to put in my trunk. And it quickly turns into, it's just going to be, let me just do it. It's just, let me just get out of the way. Let me do this. I got this. And that would be a theme like that would define our relationship. And I suspect, just talking with, a million other kids with dads, that like lots of dads kind of that way. As the dispatch has had more and more folks on the show, we've also heard this theme from the younger techs, and they're saying, the older guys don't really want to teach. And I'm curious to hear from you the extent to which you view this as a quote unquote gatekeeping thing, or is this a grumpy old men thing? Like, hey, look, my job isn't to totally, spoon feed you all this information, keep up or hit the bricks kind of a deal. What's your take?
Well, I can tell James that he's not alone, and for generations before him, including mine, that's what you deal with. And that's unfortunately the reality of the trades, is that you do get paired up with somebody who's probably a little bit jaded and a little bit cynical and just physically tired. And there's a job to do, there's a deadline, and there's another job tomorrow. And so unless you're around the special person that's going to take the time and train you and to answer all your questions, the main focus of that day is to get the job done. So here's how I navigated that as an apprentice. I made it my goal to be the best tool hander that I could possibly be.
Or flashlight holder.
Or flashlight holder. I wanted to anticipate what that tech was going to need in those early days when that's all I was a shadower. And I would, all right, I saw him that after he used this wrench, he used this screwdriver. So right now he's using this wrench and he's doing the same thing. So I'm going to have this screwdriver ready to go hand it to him, handle first. And eventually he starts seeing that, you're taking an interest. There's other things that you can do that will earn the respect of the other generation. Stay off your phone. Stay off TikTok. Stay off social media. Don't fall asleep in the van on the way to the job or the way back from the job. And that will show them that you are trying to act mature, that you're not like all the other kids that just want to be on their phones. Show up early to the job. Don't be ready to go home until the job's done and all the tools are picked up and you see that he's ready. You don't stick him with doing some of those chores. That's how you earn the respect. Now, as far as learning, let's say you're in an environment and they're still not sharing any information with you. There's a tool that you have that previous generations did not have, and that's the internet. That's YouTube, that's social media. Those are the times to get on there and ask the questions and to follow people like myself, like others. If you're in the HVAC trade, there are 3 great sources of information: HVAC School, AC Service Tech, and Love to HVAC. These are content creators that put out really good quality content that you can learn from. I didn't have that. I had to take the installation manual home with me and read it and get to know it and then bring it back to the job and put it back in the unit the next day. Now we have the internet. So actually that process is a little bit easier. So a lot of it is within your control. Grumpy old men are always going to gatekeep. They've always gatekeeped and they're always going to gatekeep. So don't rely on them to be your sole source of education. You've got to take that initiative and go get it. And it's actually easier today to go get it than it was in previous generations because of the internet.
Fantastic answer, Susie. We heard a little bit about the internet there from Tim. I wonder, do you have a question from the audience that kind of speaks to internet, AI? Folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, feed us something.
Yeah, so Daniel from New England says, my company just started using ChatGPT for in-field troubleshooting, and opinions are all over the place. I'm pretty new, so it helps me understand things faster. But now some of the senior techs are saying, why should a rookie get paid decent money if AI is doing half of the thinking? Is it fair for someone to get paid a normal tech salary while using AI for diagnostics? How are other companies handling this?
This is an interesting question. So I was talking with an HVAC business owner, and they were talking about service calls, and he was saying, listen, I don't feel good about charging 150 an hour or whatever the rate is, only for the customer to see my guy on his phone researching something. Like, we should know those answers. I don't want the customer to see us learning. And my question to him was, yeah, but what are they doing now if they're stuck? Like, nobody knows everything, particularly the early career, the sub 10 years of experience guys. Like, they're going somewhere to get that information when they're stuck, or I think worse yet, they're leaving, with the problem unsolved. So I am curious to hear your take, because I think customers don't care as much about the process as they care about the outcome. They want the problem solved correctly. And if AI, gets it there more accurately, more quickly, whatever the case is, like, I myself as a customer, I'm just like, did you fix it on a reasonable time frame? Like, great. What's been your take? What's your observation?
Again, like, AI is just the next tool. It was for my generation. Well, when I came up, there was no internet yet. But shortly after, when I was still a junior tech, you could get a smartphone and start Googling things. But before that, there were books, there were other ways to get information that took longer, and there was telephones. You could call tech support. You can call the smart tech that always knows all the answers at your company. Like, there's always been that cheat sheet, and so AI is just the next generation of that. I don't think it's bad that we're using AI, as long as we're carefully engineering the prompts so that we weed out any assumptions that AI is making. And so, like, what I did is I researched how to create a ChatGPT prompt that kept it within certain guardrails. And I specifically said, do not provide any information that is not directly from these known sources, such as code books or manufacturers' manuals. And so that weeded out some of the fluff that AI is going to always give you an answer. It may not always be a correct answer, and so you have to set those guardrails in there. I have no problem doing that, and I don't really know what the $150 an hour has to do with it. If anything, he's going to arrive at the answer quicker. And then it's up to the person whether or not they're going to just look for that answer to get the answer, or whether they're going to try to understand the fundamentals and the principle behind it, so that maybe next time they don't have to look it up. But that's always been the case. And no matter how far you go back, there's always been people that either just change a part until the unit starts running, or people that want to dig a little bit deeper to figure out what really went wrong. This is just the next version of it. And people are more concerned about the outcome than the hourly rate. I don't think we should be charging an hourly rate, especially in residential. We should be charging for the outcome. And whether that outcome takes 2 hours or a half hour, I think we make it very clear that we charge for the result. And most people understand that now.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your comment on AI and I think the term there is hallucination. So
That's
if
it.
it doesn't know the answer, it'll make it up. I often say it's like my mother-in-law in that way. If it knows something, it'll tell you at great length. If it doesn't know, it'll make it up. But in either case, it's definitely going to give you an answer.
It's going to give
It's
it
never going to say, "I don't know that."
right.
And our the sponsor that underwrites this show, FieldMind, um, I think one of the value of these purpose-driven AI tools is it only knows the documents you've trained it on. And if it doesn't know the answer, it's going to say, I have not been trained on that. So it's, specifically guardrailed in that way. And I hear you talking about the technology of your day, quote unquote. I think we're probably about the same age. And um, it is amazing because we're kind of the first generation. Every generation has seen technology go away. Guys with sticks gave way to guys with swords, and so they're, oh yeah, I remember in my day we used spears, but they migrated away. What's different about our generation, and I'm thinking about, guys 40 to 50 years old, whatever, is we saw the technology both begin and end, run its entire course and go away.
Yeah.
And, and that's been just fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I think Gen X's and maybe early millennials are probably the only ones that will ever know a world before the internet and the world after the internet, and then a world even beyond that with AI integrations. And so it's a very interesting time to live in.
Oh, I totally agree. Interesting, occasionally totally terrifying, but
Yeah.
um, so staying on this topic of like, Tim has seen some shit. So you've been in HVAC, I think 25 plus years. Am I right?
Right.
So, what's kept you in the business all for 2+ decades?
It is because I'm constantly learning new stuff. Um, I I think of it as I've had three careers within HVAC within the last 27 years. I started off as a commercial industrial technician. I fixed equipment. I worked on data center units and hospital units and mission critical systems that either could not go down, or if they went down, bad things happened. At the very minimum, you were going to lose a lot of money in production. At the very maximum, maybe even in the hospital, somebody could lose their life if there wasn't a backup. So I've been in those high pressure situations. And then I started my own business, and I did anything from residential to industrial. And I was learning a whole nother industry, which is being a business owner. And now doing residential, the way you approach a residential job is very different from what I was used to approaching a commercial industrial. Now I was thinking about the building envelope, the building enclosure, and how it reacted with the HVAC system. I was the one designing the systems that I put in, whereas in my previous uh, first career in HVAC, I was simply fixing equipment that was designed and installed by others. And then now I've gotten into more of the consulting and design side, and less in the field, still in the field some, but not doing traditional HVAC. And I'm learning a whole different way of making a building comfortable, using building science and testing a house to see how that building enclosure performs, and trying to see the invisible with thermal cameras. Those were things that I didn't do in my previous two HVAC careers. There is always something different to learn, and you become adept at even other trades. I can fix the plumbing in my house. I can fix the electrical. I can fix a lot of things on a car if I really need to. Whether you choose to or not is a different story, but you have the tools and you have the confidence to do it. And I think HVAC is very unique in that it bridges across multiple trades.
No kidding. I mean, one of the things that we've heard repeatedly is you'll have somebody on the show and I'll say, hey, what were you doing before HVAC? And a repeated theme is like something to do with, electrician, power electronics, like something, invariably you'll see some kind of background. And I think people underestimate how much, electricity and power electronics has to do with refrigeration and HVAC. I mean, I sense that you probably strongly agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. I've often said that I think a good HVAC technician knows more about electrical theory than an average electrician, because we have to think about things like frequency and reactive inductance or inductive reactance and capacitance. We have to understand those effects. Whereas, an average electrician is just thinking about wire sizing and pulling that wire and pipe sizing. Not to oversimplify that, but your average electrician on the job site, they are not thinking about the design of that that electrical system. But a service technician has to understand those fundamentals, because that's where the stuff goes wrong that he has to troubleshoot.
I always like to ask, the guys like you that sound very put together, you clearly know your stuff. Guys that, in my experience, guys that really know their stuff, you go back far enough, you find a guy that didn't know their stuff at all, and made some, so what's an example of like head in hands moment? Oh
Oh,
my God.
yeah.
I can't believe I did that. Like how,
Oh,
before
yeah.
it was Tim, the guy that knows stuff. What did Tim, the guy that didn't know anything, do, that
Oh,
you could
yeah.
share to make some of those younger guys feel a little better today?
So I got sent out to a manufacturing plant that had a lot of garage bay. There's like a manufacturing building, but you had garage bay doors that would be open, and so they were trying to heat this warehouse in the wintertime, and they would have overhead heaters. And those overhead heaters had a safety switch on there. The safety switch would sense the pressure that the combustion process, and there's a little fan that removes the combustion flue gases out of the system. There's a little pressure switch that makes sure that fan is running. And the fan was running, and I saw that the pressure switch was not allowing the circuit to complete and allow the heat to come on. So I replaced the pressure switch with one that was adjustable, and I kept adjusting it until I got the heat running. The heat came on. The next morning, my boss says, "Hey, I need you to run back out to that facility. They had a whole bunch of people go home yesterday with headaches." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "And take this guy with you." He was my buddy, that kind of worked at the time, and I had been working on heat for probably 5 or 6 years, but I had never had any formal training about the combustion process. I knew what was supposed to run, how to diagnose the part if it wasn't running, but I didn't know anything about combustion fundamentals. And so to me, there was this little micro switch that wasn't working. And by golly, I got that micro switch to start working, and I got the heat running, and it was running when I left it. Well, we both go over there, and the very first thing that he does is he takes a scissors lift up to where the vent pipe was coming out, and he looks down in there, and he says, "You need to come take a look at this." And so I went up there and I looked, and there was birds' nests just all through the pipe that had the pipe block. So the fan was running, and the safety switch was doing his job because the fan wasn't moving any air through there, and so it was not allowing the heat to come on. Well, by golly, I got the heat to come on, but it was not venting those poisonous flue gases out. And there's some people that went home because of me with slight carbon monoxide poisoning that day. And I never forgot that. And I went and I found some combustion training, and I learned about combustion, and it was eye opening what I didn't know. And so that's what we find out a lot, is that you don't know what you don't know. But once you find out that you need to learn more about something, use the resources at hand. And today there's unlimited resources to learn as much as you can about it, because at that point there's no excuse. It's your fault that you don't have that knowledge at that point.
Yeah, man. I mean, that, as you know, that is a lethal situation.
Yeah.
And so it's awesome when it can end in a, head in hands funny story and not in a mass casualty event.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I guess I have just one last question for you. We're kind of running low on time, but you seem like a guy that's got so much passion for what you do. What's a moment that, kind of caused you to say, this is why I do this?
I think it's when you figure something out that no one else was able to, and somebody can enjoy quality of life again because of that. You know, when you took the time to learn your craft and you had the perseverance to stick through a problem, and your number one concern was to get to the root cause of the problem and not just sell them something, and then you're the guy that actually fixed the problem, and now they are comfortable in their home, they're healthier in their home, their energy bills are lower, whatever that thing is that you fix that improves their quality of life, and it was because of you. I've worked really hard to get where I'm at now and to have the knowledge and experience I've had. And I've had quite a few of those moments, too many to count. And it's a great feeling. And I tell you, I can remember the first time I successfully fixed something on a job. I remember where I was. I remember the job. That is a great feeling when you fix something and it worked. And there is something about the well of pride that comes in when that happens, and it's therapeutic. And so for people that have, we have a rash of poor mental health these days, and I think especially with our young ones, and I think part of that is there's a lot of causes, but a contributing factor is that young people don't work with their hands anymore unless they get into the trades. They're not fixing things. They're not fixing their bike anymore. And so there's not that well of pride, that sense of accomplishment that I built something, I fixed something, I modified something, I restored something using my hands and my muscles and did something good. That's that sense of accomplishment that was given to us. And that is I'm a Bible reader, and that's a gift from God to look on your work and have a satisfaction. And to me, when we don't we don't put ourselves in that situation to experience that, that affects us moving forward. And so to me, whenever I've been able to fix something, but it definitely have a long-term positive effect on somebody's quality of life, that is a well of pride that I feel, and it is a rush, and you don't get over it.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, just to add to it, I totally agree. And you know, I hear a lot in HVAC as we've done these interviews about, what really sounds like solving difficult puzzles that change the course of a person's quality of life. So like these are the guys out there wearing, stepping into the phone booth, come out with the cape on, and like solving a problem for a family or a business that like instantly changes the course of their ability to be comfortable, to be happy. And often, the problems are, I mean, I don't know how often in tech the solution is restart your computer.
Yeah.
It's
usually the simple stuff. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And, in your world, that just is not the case. Often it's like very complicated problems. Someone's got to go out there, solve the puzzle, figure it out. And when when you implement a solution, it gets it done. You did it yourself. You just hear over and over. And I don't mean this in a gender biased way, but you hear this from men. Men are kind of searching for their place in this new world, I think. And like doing that thing, I did that thing. I changed the course of that person or that business's, happiness or whatever. It's real, and in a world that has less and less real stuff in it, it sounds like that's your take as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that people, the trades allow us to get back to what makes us proud and things that makes us function, and working with your hands and building something and getting to the root cause of the problem, and then learning something about it. And then the next time you see something similar, you remember it, and then you go straight to the solution. And it was that again. And you realize, okay, I just mastered a small portion of this. There is something to be proud of about that. And we need more of that.
Yeah, man. Totally agree. Tim, thank you so much for being on the show with us here today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. Join us next time as we meet with another frontline tradesman out there doing their thing. Thanks for listening to The Dispatch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with a friend in the field.